He ended slavery in Rome, at least for men. He reorganized the entire Roman state, creating assemblies that gave voice to the voiceless. And he established a system that would allow a former slave to become a Roman emperor. This is the untold story of Servius Tullius, the great reformer, the architect of political equality in ancient Rome. From the very beginning, Roman society was divided. On top were the patricians, the wealthy elite who controlled most of the land and the government. Below them were the plebs, the common people who made up the majority of the population but had very little power. In this system, most citizens were considered property owners and were expected to provide their own weapons and fight in the army when called upon, but many were too poor to do so. They were the capital class, the backbone of the economy, but they had no voice in government. Then came Servius Tullius, the king, who changed all that. When Servius Tullius became king of Rome, he inherited a kingdom in turmoil. There was a lot of inequality and people were getting fed up. So he set about fixing the system, and he started with the wealth. He divided the citizens into classes based on how much property they owned. This was the census. Those with the most property were in the first class, and those with the least were in the fifth. Each class had its own assembly. The common people, a voice in government for the first time. But he didn't stop there. He also created a new type of citizen, the late, and these were people who had been free for less than 3 years and could not vote until they had been free for 5. But Servius Tullius wanted to change all that. He believed that every free male Roman should have the right to vote regardless of property. This was a radical idea, but it was one that would have a lasting impact on Roman history. Next, he tackled the military. Until Servius Tullius, all able-bodied men were required to serve in the army, regardless of their social status, but he changed all that with his reforms. He created a system where only those with a certain amount of property were required to serve. This meant that the common people were no longer forced to fight in the army, but they were still represented by their own officers. Finally, he addressed the aristocrats. Until Servius Tullius, the Roman nobility had held most of the power in the government, but with his reforms, he changed all that. He created a system where the common people were more equally represented in government. This meant that the aristocrats no longer had a monopoly on power, and the common people finally had a chance to make their voices heard. Servius Tullius' reforms were some of the most important changes in Roman history. They created a system that allowed for more equality and representation in government. They also created a stronger army and a more stable state. And though he was assassinated before he could finish his work, his reforms lived on laying the foundation for the Roman Republic. After his death, Rome became a republic. But the seeds of inequality that he had planted bore fruit. His successors did not fully commit to his reforms, and the common people were still marginalized from mainstream Roman politics. However, his reforms did create a precedent for future republican structures in Rome, and he established a more organized and equitable system of governance. The comitia centuriata, which he created, soon replaced the patrician assemblies with more broadly based assemblies that better represented the common people. By instituting the comitia, giving the common people a greater voice in the political process. He also redefined citizenship in Rome, making it more inclusive and less dependent on property ownership. Most importantly, Servius Tullius is remembered for his commitment to equality and justice. Despite facing opposition from the ruling elite, he pushed ahead with his reforms. Determined to create a more just and equitable society, he is a reminder that even in the face of great odds, one person can make a difference. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and stay tuned for more. Thank you for watching.